I don't know that I can speak for everybody, but maybe my opinion is an indication it's a pretty difficult racetrack, and I always look at it from the perspective of how to set a car up, and it's very difficult. The fact is that as a speedway, it's not really a speedway. You know, with three corners, all three of them being different, and the corner that we use on the racetrack is most similar to a speedway type race track in that it's a high bank. That's part of its fun. It's good fun, even in our kind of cars. But the infield is, and you know, maybe my point of view is slanted by the fact that I'm driving a turbo, but it's really much too tight. The switchbacks, the S's are not really S's. It's a straight line with, it's just a very narrow straight line. You can't pass. It's very easy to be pushed off the road. So it could be made into a real nice one without a whole lot of trouble.
Track's good. Well, I've always liked the fast track. You know, we can hold it flat in a bowl, and that's a big thrill. And it adds something. You know, you go to sleep a little bit on a road course until you can kind of get pumped up on something like that, and it keeps it, you know, very interesting for me.
Sarel, I would imagine that this track configuration is quite unique to a driver like yourself. You're not going to find anything quite like it in South Africa or on the continent.
No, we haven't seen any. We haven't got anything like this there. Although, of course, we've done Daytona and Charlotte, which is something similar. So, in a South African context, yes, it's unique, but we've done it before.
No problem adjusting to the Pocono then for you?
No, not really. In fact, we like it because it's more of a turbo track than most of the others.
Well, talking about the track is one thing. Right now, let's take a look at the racetrack through the front windshield of Joe Vardy's powerful little Dodge Daytona.
Right, Steve, and Pocono, as you can see, is a large percentage of speedway, and it's a wild racetrack. In fact, set in the Pocono Mountains, it's not unusual for a deer once in a while to appear out on the main straightaway. But as we see the #1 Dodge Daytona of Joe Vardy heading down the long back straightaway, he's going to give us a fine look at this racetrack. Joe Vardy from Tampa, Florida, a former RS Series champion. We won't see him racing here today, but Joe will give us a fine look at what this racetrack is all about. 2.8 miles as we see Joe accelerating out of a very wide pit here at Pocono. A big, wide racetrack and a lot of room for maneuvering, at least on the front straightaway. But as they approach turn 1, things tighten up considerably, as Joe observes.
As you come off the front straight, you've got to watch it because it's a high-speed right-hand turn. There's a lot of radius in that turn, and you need to set up just right for that because you're coming off at a high rate of speed. Then you're going to the hairpin turn. The hairpin turn, you'd like to slow it down, so because it's off camber, you want to slow it down as fast as you can and go in as deep as you can. Come out with a nice exit speed.
Now Joe is sliding through the narrow, twisty infield, heading toward turn 3.
You've got to go up from the outside to the inside, drop a wheel off into the grass, and then exit all the way across to the other side of the turn. Okay, now we're going down the back chute, and we're going into another 180-degree turn, which heads back toward the main gate. We take a left-hand turn from the outside of the track, drop the wheel off on the inside, and slide to the outside. We're going into this turn, we're exiting, we're putting it up against the guardrail, as close to the wall as possible. Now we want to make sure our steering wheel is straight as possible so we can get the most forward speed that we can.
On this part of the Pocono racetrack, things widen out considerably, and the faster GTP cars will knock on 190 miles an hour as we see Joe Vardy out on a long, open straightaway heading down toward turn 7, where things get considerably more difficult.
You set the car in, and when you're going through the radius of that high-speed turn, the back end will start coming out a little bit. That determines on how much throttle you want to give the car to keep the back end in line. Okay, as you're exiting this turn, you want to lay in the gas pedal as hard as you can, put it up against the wall because that's where the dead air is, and that's where you want to be, and that's where you have the most speed, and we're heading toward the start-finish line.
There you have it, one lap at Pocono, and our thanks to Joe Vardy for the tour of this 2.8-mile racetrack. Steve?
On the pole block for the Pocono Grand Prix will be the Chevy March car number 56, co-driven by Bill Whittington and Randy Lanier. In qualifying with Whittington at the wheel, they averaged a speed over 123 miles an hour, an all-time track record for the road course here. And no surprise to regular IMSA fans, alongside Bill Whittington will be the 962 Porsche of Al Holbert and Derek Bell. Al Holbert is starting the race in car number 14.
Steve, in the second row, we have South African Sarel Vandermeer in a March Porsche, and Dale and Don Whittington in another March Chevrolet. They're brothers of pole sitter Bill Whittington.
Row 3 is the Jaguar team, with Brian Redman starting in car number 04. He'll be relieved by Hurley Haywood. Alongside him, the number 44 car with Doc Bundy starting. He is co-driving with team owner Bob Tullius.
Steve, we've got an Andretti in the field. It isn't Mario, it's his nephew, John Andretti, also from Nazareth, Pennsylvania, and a whole bunch of GTO and GTU automobiles in this 45-car starting field. There are smaller classes, but they're going to be having races within races in this event.
You're right, Brock. Victory as important to them as it is to the drivers of the faster GTP cars. And with this great difference in speeds, the GTP drivers find themselves in traffic early on.
They sure do, especially in the very tight infield section, which is only about 30% of this racetrack, but very difficult to pass in there, as we heard Al Holbert say earlier. Got a couple of interesting combinations up in the front rows, Steve. We've got 2 Jaguars and 2 of those March Chevrolets of the Whittington brothers, and they could be big factors, especially in the race for the title against the Porsche 962 of Al Holbert.
So Randy Lanier very serious about maintaining that series points lead. He brought 2 cars here to Pocono. And we'll be back for 500 action-packed kilometers after this.
This special presentation of American Sports Cavalcade is being brought to you by BF Goodrich, makers of TA high-tech radials, and by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
And Bill Whittington leads a field of GTP cars through turn 7 here at Pocono and down the long front straightaway, ready for a start. On the outside, Al Holbert in that turbocharged Porsche 962. And Steve, I'll bet you that Bill Whittington's going to hold the speed down at the last minute to use the torque of that big Chevrolet to out-accelerate Holbert into turn 1.
Absolutely. He'll hope to catch the Porsche with its boost down.
Turbo lag is a problem with a turbocharged car, and there it is. The green is out, and Bill Whittington, oh no, look at this, Steve. It looks like Holbert may have a jump on him.
Now, the Holbert Porsche is said to have the smallest turbo lag of any of the Porsche machines, and it shows right here. The big crowd on their feet as they are side by side through turn 1.
Boy, they sure are, Steve. And Whittington got snookered on the start, and now has lost the inside line as they head down into that very tight, very slow hairpin.
And as tight as that turn is, the Chevrolet on paper should enjoy an advantage there. But that didn't mean anything, does it, when Al Holbert's out in front of you wagging his tail at you?
Well, now they're down in that very tight infield section, and there's not much chance to pass in here as everybody kind of just falls in line and follows Holbert down through that very, very tight part of the racetrack. But Whittington right on his tail. Let's see what kind of horsepower develops as they get out onto the big main straightaway.
And this is the kind of battle we've enjoyed watching in IMSA racing ever since Riverside, Brock. Al Holbert, Derek Bell versus Whittington and Lanier. And here they come, side by side down the straightaway. Wow.
A classic matchup on the inside. 355 cubic inches of all-American Chevy horsepower versus 180 cubic inches of German turbocharged horsepower in that Porsche, Steve.
And you see them this close together, Brock, but the one thing you never know is how tightly down has Al Holbert screwed that boost now.
Sure has. As you can see, Bill Whittington dive underneath him in that very, very fast turn 7, but he just couldn't pull him down the front straight.
And just a car length or two behind Whittington, riding in third place, is the South African team. That is Sarel van der Merwe at the wheel here in the opening laps.
So Holbert leads lap number 1, and 2 interesting lines down into turn 1, Steve. Holbert down, tucked in close to the inside rail, and Whittington way up wide, but he couldn't close the distance as they scramble through that very slow hairpin in the infield.
Well, Whittington is such an aggressive driver, Brock, but in this section of the course, he's just got to be cool, not make any mistakes, and wait for the straightaway.
Well, he really doesn't have any choice in here because there's no opportunity to pass, and he's going to have to sit there. But the problem is, I think, as you noticed on the first lap, Steve, once they did get out onto the long straightaway, Holbert tended to pull him real good. So maybe there's a, oh, look at this. Whittington tried to tuck underneath Holbert coming off onto the straight, but it didn't work.
Well, it's not quite a drag race this time, Brock, but we'll see again if Al Holbert has a horsepower edge as they accelerate up towards near 190 miles an hour.
Well, as you said, Steve, there's an adjustable boost control on that 962 as we see Sarel van der Merwe running in third place. That, too, is a Porsche car, but not factory supported like the 962 of Holbert, which, as I said, probably can get maybe 800 horsepower in short bursts because of that turbocharger.
But the harder you screw down the boost, Brock, the more fuel you're going to use. And in a race of this distance, pit stops could be the difference, and fuel economy is awfully important.
Absolutely. As Brian Redman back there in that 04 Jaguar begins to challenge Kenper Miller in the number 25 March Chevrolet. That's a car very similar to the one being driven by Bill Whittington as they run through that very quick 18-degree turn 7. And look at this. It looks like Brian Redman's going to take him on the outside.
Well, Brock, Kenper Miller must have had an incredible start because he was a couple of rows behind the Jaguars, who were side by side in row number 3. But the 12-cylinder, normally aspirated Jaguar machine comes right around him now.
Sure did. Those are beautifully prepared cars being run out of Alexandria, Virginia by the Bob Tullius Racing Organization, Group 44. Doc Bundy back there. He's co-driving with car owner Tullius. And Hurley Haywood, the former Le Mans winner, is running with Brian Redman there. One of the finest race drivers in the world. Run all kinds of automobiles, and not only is he a great race driver, but he's a great guy as well.
And good to have him back, Brock, after a very short retirement. Brian now a permanent resident of Jacksonville, Florida,
where he does a driving business in classic and exotic cars when he's not racing for Jaguar. As we see him head through that final turn on the infield course and head on out in this back straightaway here at Pocono.
I talked about fuel economy earlier, Brock. The Jaguars may be the most fuel-efficient machines in this race. And while the Chevy Marches and the Porsches are pitting, they hope to be out there putting some distance on them because of that good economy.
Very, very much the case with these automobiles. Also, one of the most beautiful racing cars I think ever made. They're designed by an American, Lee Dykstra, carrying Jaguar V12 engine, as you said, and sponsored and owned by the Jaguar people. And very, very proud of them they are, and they ought to be, because they are beautifully prepared race cars.
And Brock, I'd just like to have the money the film is worth if the fans burn up all weekend long taking pictures of those Jaguars in the pits.
No question about it. One of the most photographed race cars in the world. As we see the number 15 March Chevrolet of John Kalagian. He's up in 5th place. He too jumped by the Jaguars at the start, Steve, along with Kenper Miller. But it looks like right now maybe Brian Redman's going to try to make that up. He's reeling in John at a fairly regular rate right now as we see him run through that very tight little infield course.
Well, as we saw at Elkhart Lake earlier this year, the Jaguars have been plagued with early lap crashes, Brock, and I think both drivers were just trying to stay out of trouble and get settled down. John Kalagian running 5th. He's from Folly Beach, South Carolina.
A driver that you don't hear too much about, but is capable of putting up some very quick laps. John is not one of the real veterans in this kind of racing and is still kind of finding his way around the racetrack and the big horsepower cars. And I think we're going to hear more about him as this IMSA GTP kind of racing grows and grows, which it has been over the last few years. And there he is, your leader, Al Holbert, coming down the front straightaway and diving into turn 1. And he'll start to run into the slower traffic, Steve, and that could give Bill Whittington an opportunity to catch up a little bit.
Especially in this part of the course, Brock, as they come into the hairpin. Whittington ought to be able to just suck right up behind that 962. Leading it is Al Holbert, the incredible Porsche car number 14. Bill Whittington is in the seat of number 56. Later, we'll see series leader Randy Lanier driving. The South African is having a good effort so far in the 3rd slot.
For Long Pond, Pennsylvania, for more Pocono Grand Prix action, I'm Brock Yates, along with Steve Evans and Ed Bruce, as we watch a pair of Jaguars try to gather in John Kalagian in that lone March Chevrolet. Steve Evans.
The Jaguars doing some formation flying here, Brock. That is Doc Bundy on the inside, car number 44, pulling right up behind the Chevy March of John Kalagian. Now, Kalagian jumped the Jaguars at the start, but they're getting revenge right now. Brian Redman right behind his teammate Bundy.
He sure is, as they now downshift down into 1st gear to squeeze around that very tight left-hander they call the hairpin, heading down onto the infield part of this racetrack, where it will be to the advantage of Kalagian, I would think, with a bigger torque Chevrolet. He should be able to hold off those 2 Jaguars, although it could be a different case entirely when they get out onto that long back straightaway.
Indeed, the high-winding 12-cylinder English-built machines are very tough down the straightaway. This Chevy March of Kalagian's doesn't have quite the power we see in the Whittington Lanier car.
No, it's not quite as strong a car, but John, as we said earlier, is coming on very well. He's been around sports car racing for a long, long time in smaller classes, but this is his first opportunity the last couple of seasons to run the big GT prototypes.
And here is the perfect opportunity for Doc Bundy to reel in John Kalagian. Pulls up right behind him, tucks in, and now he's going to get him on the outside, Brock.
Well, that's a very tricky move because turn 7 is about 170 miles an hour. That's an 18-degree bank right-hander, and it takes a lot of hard driving to get through that thing the way Bundy has high up on the outside. But look at this, Steve. Kalagian showing some smoke.
And apparently the power goes away on Kalagian's car as Bundy easily takes him going into turn number 1. And now it's Brian Redman's turn to pick on the ailing Kalagian.
Well, you wonder what kind of a problem was in Kalagian's car. He showed a burst of smoke coming off at turn 7, but now it seemed to have gone away. You wonder whether that was a surge of oil somewhere in the engine, Steve, that has corrected itself. Now he seems to be running all right.
Well, whatever the problem was, Doc Bundy and Brian Redman took full advantage of it, as the Jaguars are now running 5th and 6th with Kalagian back in 7th.
And behind him in that blue and white march is John Paul Jr., and he's going to challenge Kalagian as well.
So poor John Kalagian, who had such a terrific start, in fact got ahead of 2 full rows of automobiles on that first lap, is now paying the price.
Well, it could be that it's just a question of raw horsepower, Steve. When they get out on this long back straightaway, it just may be that John's car doesn't have quite as many beans as the rest of the guys, as now he's going to be challenged by John Paul Jr. in that blue and white March Chevrolet. As you well know, John Paul Jr. is one of the most talented young prospects in all of racing.
In fact, Brocky won the IMSA title a few years ago in a Porsche, had hoped to this year concentrate on kart cars, Indianapolis-style racing, but the team he was driving for had some problems, elected to park the car. John is still on the payroll, Brock. He's getting paid to drive kart cars even though he doesn't have a ride, but likes to keep his hand into this and visits the IMSA circuit occasionally, and everybody glad to have him back.
They sure are. As we see the 4th and 5th place automobiles, that is Dale Whittington, Bill's younger brother, in the other Blue Thunder March Chevrolet, being followed now by Doc Bundy in that number 44 Jaguar. So those 2 automobiles, 2 totally different kind of cars, but remember though, one is a V12, one's a V8, but both are naturally aspirated. Young Dale Whittington, what a driving family these 3 are. He today is teamed up with senior brother Don. Bill is the middle brother, and kind of the star of the family at this particular point. Dale and Don don't drive quite as much as Bill, if you can keep track of that, but all of them, when they get behind the wheel, stand on the gas.
As does this man, Doc Bundy. He's well acquainted with the Whittington brothers, as he was their chief driving instructor at the racetrack they owned, Road Atlanta.
What a way to stay in shape, right? On your own racetrack, as we watch Doc Bundy now challenge Dale Whittington down the front straightaway, and there he goes. He ducks inside Dale and takes over 4th place as he squeezes through some slower cars on the inside as well. So Doc Bundy, a good, strong move by that Jaguar down the front straightaway, Steve.
Well, so far, Bob Tullius and team have got to be pleased with the Jaguars' performance. Their battle plan was not to go out and try to lead this thing. They know they don't have the raw power of the Whittington car or the Al Holbert car. But as I mentioned earlier, they do have fuel economy, and they hope that'll help them in this long race.
And reliability as well, Steve. They've had some unfortunate crashes, as you said earlier, during the season, but when these cars run, they keep on running, as does this automobile, the number 14962, being driven by your current leader, Al Holbert. By the way, Steve, Al's father, Bob Holbert, is a familiar name in racing, was one of the great drivers in the post-war renaissance of sports car racing in the United States. A Porsche driver as well, just like his son.
And finished up his career on the famed Cobra team of Carroll Shelby, right?
Exactly. A fine race driver, and often comes to the races to help his son out in the pits. I don't think he's here today, though.
In his first appearance at Indianapolis, the 500 this year, Al Holbert was a serious candidate for Rookie of the Year, a strong finish.
Run stock cars, has run sports cars, and of course trying his hand now at Indianapolis racing. A very, very accomplished race driver. A very quiet man on and off the racetrack. Not quite as spectacular as some of the other guys that you might see, but boy, does he do a good job in anything he tries to race.
While we were watching Al Holbert, Brian Redman in the 04 Jaguar got around Dale Whittington for the 5th position. Whittington now wants it back. Starts to try him on the inside, then ducks back in. Maybe the outside is the way to go. As they go into turn 1, he may be able to use this slower traffic, Brock, to his advantage here.
Well, he tries him on the outside. Brian Redman had the inside line, but he gets bogged by the number 5962 of Bob Aiken, running back in 11th place. That car with a smaller 2.8-liter engine is not as fast as the 962 leading the race, although they look identical, as now Dale Whittington really put some distance on Brian Redman. That little scramble there down into turn 2 and that tight hairpin really mixed things up and gave Dale Whittington a real break.
That was an intelligent race car driving on the part of the youngest of the Whittington brothers, using that traffic as he did. Beautiful.
It sure was. He kind of made a move down on the inside with down the front straightaway, saw that way might be blocked and tried the outside and made it work.
Well, the infield turns are certainly the test of handling here at Pocono. Here's the test of horsepower, the long back straightaway, Brock.
It sure is. This is such a weird kind of a racetrack in that about, as I said earlier, about 70% of it is just raw, flat-out straightaway, and the other 30% is just about as tight a stretch of racetrack as you'll see in any road course in the United States.
And Brock, the banking here at Pocono is something these drivers are not used to, except for Daytona, of course. When you've got 18 degrees of bank, you've got more tire wear on that outside, right?
Well, it's a chassis setup that demands a lot of compromises. We heard Al Holbert talk about that earlier. You got to set the car up for that very fast, almost flat-out right-hander at in the middle of the straightaway, and also get set up for this really tight little stuff down in here.
Now, Brian Redman has got a payback here on Dale Whittington, possibly, Brock. He's got Whittington now boxed in behind that same red 962, the car of Bob Aiken.
Well, look at that. Brian Redman just spiked the brakes and ducked underneath him on the inside in that first gear left-hander called a hairpin. So now he got it back. A good piece of driving by Brian Redman that basically puts the same move on Dale that Dale put on him a lap earlier.
And in the meantime, John Paul Jr., car number 45, stays in the 7th position.
So Dale Whittington now chasing Brian Redman as we watch the third-place automobile, Sarah Vandermeer. He's been kind of staying out of trouble all day long, kind of riding alone there in that third spot, but holding on to it nonetheless. That automobile, as we said, is kind of a hybrid car. An English chassis, a German engine, a South African driver. Boy, what a combination. But I'll tell you what, they won some races as we watch Sarah Vandermeer heading into the pits for what I'm sure is going to be the first of his routine pit stops here at Pocono.
Well, this pit stop may be coming a little earlier than the crew expected, Brock. I think they hope to stay out there a few more laps than this.
Well, you may be right, Steve, but it's possible, too, that Sarel had to use that old boost knob a little bit more than he wanted to just to stay up with those leaders who are really running hard. There's his co-driver, Tony Martin. It looks like he, was going to get in to relieve Sarel, but Sarel said, just stand by, Tony, and relax. Why don't you clean the windshield a little bit? Keep busy. I'll call you when I need you as the crew continues to change the left side tires. But this man, Doc Bundy, could catch up and take over third place if Sarel doesn't get out of the pits in time. So there's a big opportunity for Doc Bundy right now as the pit stop is about over for Sarel Vandermeer, Steve.
Well, Tony Martin latches the door down on the Porsche March. The crew, however, not quite completed with their work. And Sarel Vandermeer, you can see the tension a little bit in his face there, Brock. He wants out of that pit area. He came in before anybody else, and that's not good to begin with.
And here's some more bad news, Steve. Doc Bundy has just gone by to take over third place as the crew finally gets their work done and Vandermeer gets underway. The problem here at Pocono is in this kind of pits that he's got a very slow course back through the infield before he can get up to full speed. And here's another pit stop.
Well, Brock, Dale Whittington, who was running 7th, has brought the 57 car into the pits. His brother Don has now been strapped in, the door slammed shut, and they will re-enter the fray. But apparently the car not yet moving. The engine a little balky. In fact, it does not want to start under its own power, so the crew is going to have to bump start it. How humiliating. A $200,000 race car that can't even self-start. But the guys putting their backs into it. Don Whittington brings the Chevrolet engine to life, and out onto the racetrack Don goes. And this is his first time at the wheel today here in the Pocono Grand Prix. His younger brother doing a fine job of keeping that car in contention. So now it's Don's turn to go out and try to pick up a few positions more. So a good pit stop kept Don Whittington in that 7th spot. Brock Yates is down in the pits with Dale.
Okay, with Dale Whittington, it just gave up to his brother Don after a good, strong run. Dale, you're having a pretty good battle with Brian Redman and the Jaguar for a while.
That was the very best race I've had in a while. I was laying back to save the tires, the brakes, and conserve fuel. We came in a little quicker than I thought. Don will finish the race, and we should have a good one.
Looking car running strong?
Yeah, I like that pass I put on him. Then he got me back. That was good, though.
I had a feeling watching that, Brock, that the youngster Whittington was having a good time dueling with the master of world endurance racing, Brian Redman, and obviously he was having a very good time as Al Holbert, who's got a big lead in the Porsche 962, car number 14, over the Whittington Lanier team. The Jaguar now up into 3rd spot, captained right now by Doc Bundy. The other Jaguar in the 4th position, the South African Porsche March in 5th.
More pit stop action here at the Pocono Grand Prix as John Paul Jr. brings his March Chevrolet in for relief. And taking over for him is his co-driver, John Morton, El Segundo, California, a real veteran of all kinds of sports car racing, tries his hand periodically at Indy cars as well. Riding in 6th place as he heads down into turn 1, trying to accelerate that automobile up to speed. It's going to take him almost a full lap before he gets out onto the long back straightaway as we watch the current leader, Al Holbert, in that 962 Porsche. Established a lead right off the starting line and has not given it up so far. But he's going to have to make a pit stop. He's going to have to give up to a relief driver, and he's one of the best in the business, Derek Bell. Steve is with him.
Derek, with only 2 planned pit stops, it's difficult really for the drivers to get equal amount of time in the car. What's the plan with the Holbert team?
Well, Al's done a great job in the first hour, and I hope I can keep up the good work, and I'll probably stay until the end.
And if you should get tired, Al's always there to relieve you.
Yes, that's right, he is. I hope we don't need him.
He should be coming in soon.
Yeah, in about 4 laps, I guess.
Good luck.
Thank you.
A very poised veteran of endurance car racing, Derek Bell, along with his co-driver, Al Holbert, 2 of the real professionals in this kind of racing, as Holbert essentially unchallenged for the lead, running along very smoothly, just trying to stay out of trouble. And now let's go to Ed Bruce, who's found himself a quiet place and a special guest.
Thank you, Brock, and I'm sure you'll recognize this gentleman, a man that I've had the pleasure of talking to on several occasions in the past. This is John Bishop, president of the International Motorsports Association. John, Pocono has quite a history, and it's got some special significance for you, doesn't it?
Well, it certainly does, Ed. We were, when we started IMSA back in 1969, we had to get our series off the ground, and this is the first race course where IMSA ever sanctioned a race. And and it was very small potatoes, and we had 382 spectators, and I think we lost about $30,000 on the race. And so coming back, we promoted our own in those days.
IMSA's come a long way since then.
Yeah, I'll say. And of course, the cars were different, and the track was different. But
how many cars ran?
We started, I think, about 23 cars on the small oval here, the 5/8 mile oval. And we did like a miniature of the Indianapolis race, only with Formula Fords. And we did it for 200 miles, and it was a great race. Fantastic race. Nobody came.
Thank you, John. Let's go back to more racing at the Speedway.
Well, thousands of people have come today, John Bishop, to see this man, Al Holbert, lead the Pocono Grand Prix every lap so far. But sooner or later, he's going to have to bring that car into the pit area. Derek Bell said a while back it'd be 4 laps, and it has been 4 laps, and sure enough, here comes Holbert into the pits, Brock.
And this could mean a lead change as well, Steve, because he's going to have to make a driver change and probably take on fuel and change tires, and it's very possible that he'll give it up to the Whittington Lanier cars. We see Derek Bell ready to climb aboard, and here comes the Whittington Lanier March Chevrolet, and that should give them the lead as the clock ticks away in the Bell-Holbert pits. Al Holbert helping Derek Bell get hooked up, and that takes quite a bit of time, Steve.
It sure can, Brock. You've got the radio connection to make, sometimes in hot weather, a cool suit or a cool hat. But they get it done very quickly. They've done it many times before. The crew, as you said, installing new rubber. And this man now becomes the only driver other than Holbert to lead this race, Bill Whittington, car number 56. But that may be short-lived, Brock, as he has not come into the pits for his first stops. When he does, Derek Bell may well take that lead back.
So it's a 2-car race at this particular point as Derek Bell gets underway, accelerating up through the gears, out of the Pocono pit lane, and down into turn 1. But right now, it should be that Bill Whittington is out on that fast back straightaway, and you got to be sure that he's hustling, trying to put as much distance between him and Derek Bell as possible before he makes his stop.
Well, Al Holbert's first concern, Brock, is with the tires off the outside of that automobile. And they're checking the wear factor on them right now to make sure that their strategy is all in order as far as tire changes throughout the course of this race are concerned.
Right, Steve, and it will also tell Al Holbert, who, by the way, is a very technically minded race driver, how the chassis is working, and if, in fact, they're going to have to make some chassis changes on their next stop. In the meantime, though, it is up to this man, Derek Bell, to gain the distance that they lost in that stop. He's back in 3rd place behind Bill Whittington and that March Chevrolet. In 2nd place, the Bundy Tullius Jaguar. A good race between 3 different kinds of automobiles here at the Pocono Grand Prix. We'll be right back with more.
Here at the Pocono Grand Prix, Bill Whittington in the Chevy March car number 56 leads, but only due to the pit stop by car number 14. New driver Derek Bell is back in 3rd, trying to make up the ground he lost. Now, Whittington, Brock Yates, is going to have to pit here sooner or later. He's got to be getting low on fuel. In fact, he's coming in right now.
He sure is, Steve, and this is going to be a little bit of a problem for this team because Randy Lanier, who's going to relieve Bill Whittington, is quite a bit smaller than Bill. Physically smaller, that means some seat adjustments. As we see the car stop, there is Randy Lanier, who owns the automobile. He's going to unhook Bill Whittington and help him get out of the cars. The fuel goes on board. They're going to change tires as well. And there comes Bill. Wow, does he come out of that car right on the deck, back on his feet. Now he's going to try to help Randy Lanier get hooked up and get ready to get back into the race. What a flurry, Steve.
I give Whittington a 9.5 on that dive, Brock. There is no lengths to which that man won't go to conserve a tenth of a second on or off the racetrack.
He is a competitor. He just drives that thing as hard as it'll go, and not only that, but he works as hard as he can while he's in the pits.
Well, Derek Bell now in second spot. Somewhere out in front of him is Doc Bundy in the Jaguar. And here goes Randy Lanier, the points leader in this IMSA Endurance Series, a guy who has progressed so much thanks to the tutelage of Bill Whittington. Brock Yates is down in the pit area right now with Bill Whittington.
With Bill Whittington, who put up a valiant effort against that turbo car, but it looks like there's just more boost left than you guys can handle, huh?
No contest. Just, you know, that's the difference between 785 horsepower and 585. You can't overcome it, you know, he's just too strong.
Where were you? I'm sure you were able to handle him in the infield, but big power just came on the back chute, huh?
Yeah, what happens when you get down in the bank, we can run it flat for a while and the tires give up a little bit, but even at that, he's just too much. You know, he's pulling you anytime he wants to.
I was surprised he pulled you off the line even.
I figured that was going to happen, but, you know, what are you going to do?
Well, in this kind of racing, anything can happen to these automobiles. Remember, 500 kilometers will be run today. And here's our third leader of the day, Doc Bundy, in the number 44 Jaguar. Now, Bundy has not made his first pit stop. The Jaguar, as I mentioned before, is very fuel efficient, but somewhere on the wall is the team owner, Bob Tullius, with his helmet in hand because it can't stay out there too much longer. In fact, already coming in for a driver change is the other team car from Jaguar, the 04 car. Out of the car is Brian Redman, and getting in, world-class driver Hurley Haywood. Hurley out of the pits in a hurry, Brock.
Right, Steve. They've had that car up among the leaders all day long. They've not held the lead, but been in the top 5 most of the day, and you can be sure that Haywood, who's a very steady driver, will keep it in contention. Here comes a nose piece for the other Jaguar. That's the Tullius Bundy car. You wonder whether or not when they were dicing with Dale Whittington, both he and Brian Redman may have had some contact. There's Bob Tullius, the co-driver and owner of this team, waiting for his teammate Doc Bundy to make a stop.
Well, Doc Bundy, Brock, is trying to make use of every drop of racing gasoline possible in that car. That is really the only advantage, if that can be called an advantage, that these cars enjoy. And I emphasize again, is that fuel economy. And look at Bundy out there, just hammer down, has not pitted even though all the leaders have been in.
Well, you heard Bill Whittington say it in that interview with me a little bit ago that the die is cast, really. The turbocharger on that Porsche makes the car so powerful that normally aspirated cars like the Jag and the Chevy cars really are at a disadvantage. As we watch Doc Bundy dive into the pits, and there comes Derek Bell in the number 14962, and that is going to put him back into the lead with a stop by this automobile.
So Bob Tullius helping Doc Bundy from the number 44 car, and they have that spare nose piece ready, Brock, but it doesn't look like there's any attention being played to it now.
Right, Steve, you can see the crew chief there in the foreground. He signaled to just hold the piece in readiness, but it looks like the nose piece on that 44 Jaguar is in good shape. So here goes Derek Bell back into the lead. It didn't take him long to get back up there. Steve fell all the way back to 3rd during those pit stops, but boy, it just was inevitable almost after Whittington and then Bundy stopped that he was going to get back into 1st place.
Well, when you got 2 drivers on one team, the quality of an Al Holbert and a Derek Bell, it makes it doubly tough, especially when they've got apparently the most powerful car out there.
Right, Steve. That puts a lot of responsibility on this man, Bob Tullius, now in 3rd place, but he's got a whole crew and another car, the Redman Haywood automobile, as well to worry about. Let's go to Steve Evans with Tullius's co-driver, Doc Bundy.
Little front-end damage on the Jaguar. Contact made.
Yeah, I don't understand that, Steve. I was a little bit slower than the March in the infield, but I don't think I was holding him up any. And we come into the hairpin and got balked a little bit, but I was on the inside. He just flat turned right into me. Just...
Which car was this?
57. You know, Thunder seems to want to make their way through.
Aggressive young man.
Yeah.
You know, your crew was expecting a few laps before you came in. You were leading it and enjoying it, apparently.
Oh, yeah. I stretched her out as far as I could. We seem to have gotten some of the mileage back into the Jaguar now, and I wanted to take advantage of that as long as I could. And I ran her smack out, and then I called him and told him I'm coming.
At this race distance, is that economy a distinct advantage at this particular distance?
I think so. The longer you can stretch them out, it makes everybody else run harder. And we had fallen back early. For some reason, my car wasn't running at the beginning of the race. When I fired it up on the grid, it sounded like a couple cylinders just weren't there. And we nailed it on the start. I knew that it wasn't right. I figured it was going to be a long day, but after about 5 laps, she cleaned up and started scooting.
Well, scooting it is, but right now the boss is at the wheel. Bob Tullius holding 3rd place, but right behind him, the Vandermeer Martin Porsche March in 4th place. But Derek Bell, Al Holbert in the lead in their 962 at Pocono. We'll be back with more with the Grand Prix.
As far as the 3rd position is concerned here in the Pocono Grand Prix, nothing's changed. It's still quite a dogfight between Bob Tullius and the green and white Jaguar and Sarel van der Merwe in the Porsche March car number 0, Brock.
Right, Steve. There's a lot of traffic out there, don't forget, and we've had some incidents, as we heard Doc Bundy describe, with some little brushes of the bodywork. And look at this. Van der Merwe just moves by Bob Tullius down the front straightaway. That you can be sure there was a little boost applied to that old Porsche coming down through there.
A couple of twists to the knob in that cockpit, no question about it. Now does he back the boost down, Brock, trying to get back to that economy factor and just hold off Tullius? Looks like it.
Well, there's a bunch of traffic down in there, some slower cars that they both got to get by. Boy, that is one slow corner as they move through that field of back markers. Not necessarily back markers, that's not fair to say, because the guys are running in their own GTU and GTO race. As we watch John Morton come off the infield part of the racetrack and head down the back straightaway. That is a car of considerable power, Steve. We've seen it lead a couple of races during the season with John Paul Jr. and John Morton. Right now they're in 5th place. Behind them, that's Don Whittington in the number 57 automobile that brother Dale tangled with Doc Bundy and Brian Redman with earlier in the race. Probably one of the better little dust-ups that we saw this afternoon.
Well, and all of these cars, Brock, are going to have to make at least one more pit stop. The plan for most of them is one more. And anytime you've got pit stops involved in driver changes, anything can happen in endurance racing.
Oh, absolutely, because these cars take, as we said earlier, and we've seen earlier, it takes a long time to change drivers in these things, and just a little bit of a glitch with an unbuckled seat belt or having some problems, as we see Derek Bell come down the front straightaway. Any kind of a little glitch there, and those driver transfers can just eat up sometimes as much as a minute trying to get out of the pits. So all the advantage that a car like this 962 of Derek Bell and Al Holbert can build up can be eaten up with a bad pit stop. So that's always in the back of everybody's mind. Speaking of Al Holbert, let's go to Steve Evans with him in the pit area.
Well, Al, I think you've got the Blue Thunder team kind of talking to themselves a little bit. Mr. Whittington says every time he thinks he's catching you, you just drive away from him.
Well, I wondered what he was doing back there. I mean, I was trying to run a right pace, and all of a sudden he cut a couple seconds off. My lap times are pretty much within a half a second all the time.
Your first concern when you got out of the car were the tires. You immediately rushed to the tires to look at the wear there.
Well, it's always a problem here because, you know, you got one corner here that you got to pay attention to. It creates a lot of heat in the tire. And
that last turn?
Yes, and we've been trying to take care of them, and I just wanted to see if the way we made the car work, if that's it, and if we have to run harder, whether we can.
Were you pleased with what you saw?
Yeah, they're okay.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement from Al Holbert as a pretty unemotional guy at the racetrack. Randy Lanier, though, he's a very emotional guy, Steve Evans. Boy, he just gets pumped up. When he gets in that automobile, he drives it as hard as he can, but around the pits, he's really a nervous man, especially with 2 cars in the race today.
Well, I think you'd be a little concerned too, Brock, and a little excited if you were leading a world-famous series like this in your first year of serious competition. He has to pinch himself every once in a while to make sure it's true.
And absolutely, and of course he's got about, what, $500,000 worth of race cars out there running around. Don Whittington in the other Blue Thunder Lanier automobile just got it into the dirt there. Hopefully Randy didn't see that. Might have made him a little more nervous.
Don is running in the 5th position right now. Whoa, and problems with Don Whittington. The Morton car number 45 manages to avoid the spinning number 57. And to Easel Whittington, all right, just right back into the race like nothing happened.
Absolutely. Well, I hope Randy didn't see that. He said, oh boy, almost lost one of the old teammates out there. But Don didn't hurt anything. Might have possibly flat spotted a car. Looked like those cars have so much acceleration that he probably just got on the throttle just a little bit early, coming off that slow infield part of the racetrack and onto the back straightaway of the speedway and just looped it. But back underway now in good shape. All right, the Vandermeer Martin car in for a routine pit stop. That is now Tony Martin, who's taken over for Sarel Vandermeer, the owner of the automobile. These South Africans doing a very good job holding down 3rd place. Remember, we saw Tony ready to get in earlier in the race and was kind of consigned to cleaning the windshield, but now he's going to have a chance to get out there and show his stuff. And a good driver he is. Although he's going to need to muster all his skill right now because that stop dropped he and his teammate back into 6th place. So let's go to Steve Evans with Sarel Vandermeer, Tony Martin's teammate, in the pit area.
Cyril, the car running solidly out there in 3rd place for a good deal of the time, but your pit stops have come earlier than anybody else's.
We're using a bit more than we expected, but it was over a 1/3 distance, so that doesn't worry us. But what's happened now is that the boost is stuck at over 2 bar, which is over 1,000 horsepower, and if we can't fix that, the engine is just going to blow itself to pieces. So it's working. Was unscheduled, this last one, yes.
Well, there's some prodigious numbers there, and that number 0 car, that's 1,000 horsepower Sarel Vandermeer's talking about out of 183 cubic inches, and that is a graphic example of what turbocharging can do for an engine, Steve Evans.
And there's a lot of areas on this course, Brock, where 1,000 horsepower is a handicap unless it's managed properly.
Right, Steve, and there's some problems with John Morton in the number 45 Chevy March. He's puffing out some oil. It's hard to say what that is. It seems to be coming out of the right side exhaust pipe or coming off one of the headers. It could be an oil leak of some kind that's just working in the corners because it looks like it's cured itself down the straightaway. John's in 5th place right now, and a pit stop for him could put him way out of contention because at present it's Derek Bell and Al Holbert leading here in Long Pond, Pennsylvania in the Pocono Grand Prix.
Well, bad news for one half of the Jaguar team. Clearly, Hurley Haywood has got big problems in the 04 car, and that will leave the job up to the 44 car above Tullius and Doc Bundy. So Hurley Haywood from Ponte Verde, Florida, is off in the grass, out of everybody's way, but also out of the race.
And a tough break for him and his teammate Brian Redman as well, as we see John Morton. Remember, he was smoking heavily on the back straightaway a few minutes ago. Now he's into the pits, and it looks as if he's going to make a routine stop. The crew is going to make some left side tire changes, and his co-driver, John Paul, getting ready to get on board. And here is Don Whittington, currently 4th place. That's his brother Dale doing the windshield cleaning job right now, and it looks as if Don is going to stay on board, Steve.
Yes, Dale was ready in case Don wanted some relief. He waved him off. Going to get the windshield cleaned, some fresh rubber on that car, and charge on out there. He will, if they hurry here, retain the 4th position. John Paul Jr. was in the pits long enough to slip back to 7th. So the Blue Thunder race cars now occupy the 2nd and the 4th positions. Should Al Holbert and Derek Bell have any problems at all with that Porsche, the Whittingtons are ready to step right up. And here is John Paul Jr. from Atlanta, Georgia, car number 45, the Phil Conti Racing Chevy March. He's headed back out in the 7th spot. Let's rejoin Ed Bruce, who's still chatting with IMSA founder John Bishop.
Thank you, Steve. We're back out in the woods in the Pocono Mountains to get away from all the noise so John and I can talk about IMSA. John, we've had the pleasure of seeing some great IMSA races through the year. What can we expect next year from IMSA?
What you can expect is continued growth of the GT prototypes to the point where we're going to run them by themselves in most of the races. And we're going to run the production bodied cars, the GTO and GTU cars, by themselves in most of the races. And we think from a promotional standpoint and a crowd-pleasing standpoint and from the manufacturer's standpoint, that's the way to go.
John Bishop, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Let's go back to more racing.
Well, as we saw on the pit stop of John Paul Jr., car number 45, Brock, there was little attention paid to the engine. Maybe somebody should have taken a look because oil's coming from somewhere.
Well, it seems to be only coming out on fast left-hand turns, Steve, and it could be a breather or something in one of the oil lines or a fitting in the engine that is not hurting the engine overall, just using up some oil. But here is an unexpected stop by the leader. That is Derek Bell coming into the pits very quickly and a bit of a surprise, Steve.
I'll say it's a surprise to everybody because their battle plan was 2 stops only. The car can't possibly need fuel. They're putting some in anyway. It's attention to a tire, Brock, it looked to me.
It sure is, and it seems to be they're looking at the right front tire as Randy Lanier now has the bit in his teeth. You can be sure that he knows that his chief rival in this race is in the pits, and it's now up to Lanier to get by before Derek Bell can get back underway. They've done whatever they have to do, and it looks as if the car is coming down off the jacks and Bell's underway. But the question is, will Randy Lanier get by in time to recapture the lead?
I don't believe he's going to get by, Brock. Here comes Lanier out of that last turn, but Derek Bell escaped from the pits with his lead intact.
He sure did. So Randy Lanier does take off a number of seconds and pares down the lead a bit at this man, Derek Bell, but did not succeed in recapturing the lead. We'll have to try to find out what happened to that automobile because it must have been a very sudden thing. Bell just zoomed off that last very fast turn, number 7, and just darted into the pits, had a quick look at the automobile and back underway again. As we watch Randy Lanier threading his way through the slower part of the infield, trying to make up some distance, now being balked a little bit by some of the slower automobiles in this race. And now out onto the back straightaway where that big Chevy really gets up to full speed.
The early part of the season, Brock, there was a significant difference between the lap times of Bill Whittington and Randy Lanier co-driving this automobile. But that margin has narrowed. Lanier's time's almost as quick as Whittington's now.
He's been a very quick learner in this business. He's actually only been racing really actively for about 5 years. And for a relative novice, Randy Lanier is just doing a superb job. Another stop for Derek Bell. Second one in 2 consecutive laps. There's got to be troubles with that car, Steve.
Well, this is the break that Randy Lanier, Bill Whittington have been looking for. The normally perfect Porsche has got problems. And now, you were right, Brock, the right front tire is coming off now and being replaced. So the problem is in the area of tires.
Very possible, Steve, that he ran over some debris and cut that right front tire, which caused that pit stop, or the second pit stop at least. And that was the one that gave this man, Randy Lanier, the opportunity to jump into the lead. He couldn't catch up when the first Bell stop. The second one was too much for Derek Bell, and we've got ourselves a new leader. As Derek Bell once again gets underway, and now it's going to be a horse race to the finish. That's got to be frustrating for Derek Bell. It's got to make the Lanier crew very happy, as well as the thousands of spectators, as the Holbert crew takes a look at that failed tire. Let's go to Steve Evans with the boss, Al Holbert.
Al, Derek came in a little bit earlier than we might have expected and then came in again. Tire problems?
Yeah, you know, it's the old thing. You never let the driver call the tire, and we should know better. Just change them all.
So you really...
He called the right rear tire. It was the right front. There's not a driver in the world that can tell you what tire is flat.
Okay, and now with the extra time of that last stop, would you still consider getting in the car and now trying to save some time with Derek?
Well, we'd have to. See, he didn't have enough laps to get points. So he's got to stay in.
Good luck.
Thanks.
An interesting observation by Al Holbert, the fact that Derek Bell, a seasoned professional, could not tell whether the right rear or the right front tire was soft. And that particular bad diagnosis cost him the lead here at Pocono. As John Paul Jr. now in the pits once again with his automobile in 7th place. So it's Randy Lanier leading the Pocono Grand Prix, as Derek Bell charges hard to overcome a pair of disastrous pit stops.
After a tire miscue on the part of the Al Holbert Derek Bell Porsche, this young man, Randy Lanier from Davie, Florida, leads the Pocono Grand Prix. But Brock Yates, he still has 1 pit stop to go. There's no way he could finish this race with the fuel he has on board.
And we know that there's a horsepower advantage with that Porsche 962. Bill Whittington has already expressed it. So it is up to Randy Lanier, I suppose, to just stay with that automobile as long as he possibly can. But he is going to make that stop you talked about, Steve, right now.
And precious time will be lost as this car comes in for fuel and possibly rubber. And Brock, it'll be interesting to see if there's a driver change, if Bill Whittington gets in. That has been their strategy in earlier races this year, was for Whittington to finish those final laps as Derek Bell is catching up, trying to get the lead before Lanier can get out of the pits.
Well, your one question is answered right now, Steve, because that is Bill Whittington in the background there. He's not going to get into the automobile. Randy Lanier carries on back out of the pits. A quick stop, quick enough, I would think, to prevent this man from not taking the lead. Yes, in fact, Randy Lanier does hold on to the lead. There goes Derek Bell down into turn one. Randy Lanier is already through turn two and onto the infield part of the racetrack. So that was a successful stop for the Blue Thunder team.
But it did narrow the gap between first and second place, and Derek Bell after, and you know he feels so bad about that tire problem. He knows that that was his fault. So he's trying to make up for it right now and driving as hard as he can. He's about 20 car lengths behind Lanier right now.
And you know that Randy is feeling the pressure. Look at that. He's off the racetrack. That could cost Lanier the race. What a shame. He appeared to just get on the brakes a little bit too hard. There he spins the automobile, trying to get it back underway onto the racetrack, doubtlessly frustrated. He just got into that little kinky corner in the infield, a little bit too hot, and got that car sideways.
Well, he had to be feeling tremendous pressure, knowing that Derek Bell was just seconds behind him.
Got to just make him furious because of all the corners that he could have problems here on this racetrack, especially the big one that Derek Bell is flying through right now. That was the one that he could have gotten into trouble with, that simple little left-hand corner, and that's what perhaps cost him the race, as we said.
Well, the way he was four-wheeling it out in the dirt there, Brock, I thought it was a Whittington in that car for a moment. In fact, let's take a look at it again.
Well, it's a funny little spin, Steve. He seemed to pinch it down into that corner, and then all of a sudden the car just darts to the right and off the racetrack. I wonder if perhaps a brake locked on him or something. It just put that car off in the dirt. I'm sure it didn't damage the automobile a great deal, but I'm sure the damage to Randy's pride was significant.
And all he can think of at this point in time is get me back on that asphalt. Where is Derek Bell?
Well, he stomps on the throttle right here and is a little bit too exuberant in applying the power to that big Chevrolet engine, because right here he gets the car sideways again. It doesn't look too serious, but actually probably maybe 3 or 4 more seconds are eaten up with that. So right now Derek Bell finds himself in a very comfortable position, having disposed of Randy Lanier in rather convincing fashion on that with that little spin. Let's go to Steve Evans now with Derek Bell's teammate, Al Holbert, for his feelings on the incident.
Well, Al, the little miscue out there on Randy Lanier's part was exactly what you needed to kind of even those things up.
Yes, I think it made it a little easier. The race isn't over yet, but, you know, we were anticipating Derek catching him, but it was going to be real close. He'd have to work for it. And, you know, we did our own share, so I guess it evens it out.
So the brakes fall evenly here at Pocono, 1 for Derek Bell and 1 for Randy Lanier, and right now it's basically back to where it was before it all started. Derek Bell now holding the lead, Randy Lanier back in second place, struggling, hanging on, driving as hard as he can to try to narrow the distance, but in his heart he must know that that big horsepower advantage that this automobile has could spell the difference. As Derek Bell weaves his way through that very slow infield section. We've seen a couple of spins here already, and who's to know? Look at this. Suddenly Bell's off the racetrack.
But recovers very quickly. Brock lost a second at the very most, and that really is not going to be enough to help Randy Lanier.
Well, we've seen a couple of spins on this infield portion of the racetrack. It could be that some people are laying down some oil in there. We saw John Morton's car smoking heavily, and that could have been part of the problem with an oil leak. And when you see the leaders start to get sideways, it implies that the racetrack's getting plenty slippery. So you can be sure that this man, Derek Bell, will be watching himself as he gets into that twisty part of the racetrack here at Pocono. There is Bill Whittington, co-driver Randy Lanier, on the radio, and I'll bet, Steve, he's telling him to be careful.
And I think he's also telling him, Brock, Randy will take second place. Don't lose it now. Just stay calm. Don't get in trouble. You're not going to catch that Porsche unless it breaks. We'll take the points and the money that go with second. Here's Bob Tullius running a very strong third in the number 44 Jaguar. Dependability, good fuel economy has been kind to this operation today, Brock. In fact, here comes Tullius in for his last pit stop.
Well, you can see that co-driver Doc Bundy is standing by there, helmet on, ready to get into the automobile, but I doubt seriously whether they're going to make that driver change. As we said earlier, that takes time, and they can't afford any time right now because this man, Don Whittington, and the other Blue Thunder March Chevrolet is rapidly closing on third place. So, Bob Tullius underway, trying to preserve third place as a charging Don Whittington chases him down. So we have the Bell Holbert Porsche 962 leading here over Randy Lanier and Bill Whittington in second place at the Pocono Grand Prix.
We are in the closing laps of the Pocono Grand Prix, and suddenly car number 56 running second is slowing. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates and Ed Bruce. There is a problem, Brock, for Randy Lanier.
There sure is. We just saw one of the slower automobiles speed past him on the long back straightaway as Bob Tullius, now in third place, has an opportunity to pass into second as Randy Lanier slides through that very, very fast last turn, about half speed, really, and heads into the pits. It's hard to tell what the problem is. There's no smoke from the automobile. It's doubtful that he's out of fuel. What do you think the trouble could be, Steve?
Oh, it's hard to say, Brock. They have had transmission problems with this car in the past. You remember at Elkhart Lake, that's what put them out of the action. And Bill Whittington gives the car a kick. He's not particularly pleased with it.
Well, you can't blame him as this automobile begins to surge toward second place. They haven't got it yet. If Randy can get it back underway, there's still a possibility of saving it. But now, here comes some smoke from the engine compartment, and that is hardly an encouraging sign. And here comes Bob Tullius.
And at this point, Tullius can glance over, see the door open on the 56 car, and know that right now, as he crosses the start-finish line, the Jaguar is in second place. Right now, you're going to see a very cautious Bob Tullius wanting to keep second. Also, we're looking at a very dejected Randy Lanier as he tries to shed himself of the radio communication lines and all the various other paraphernalia, just disgusted with 56. There's been happier moments in Randy's career. Let's not forget he's run a number of races along with Bill Whittington this year, but not today. Here is Tullius, the Group 44 car, still out there in second position. Down in the pit area with Randy Lanier is Brock Yates, and as soon as Randy gets his helmet off, Brock will have a word with him.
Randy, a tragic break. What was the problem? What happened to the car?
Couldn't tell you. All dropped out of the car and blew all on really bad. When it blew, it just got all over the car. I spun it over there.
You're running beautifully. The car all of a sudden just started to smoke. Huh?
I came in to get gas. Felt like the tires was gone on me. Felt like they went away, but I guess I was losing oil somewhere. Made me spin over there.
Wow.
So
tough break. Super drive otherwise.
Back up to Michigan next.
Randy Lanier already looking forward to the next race on the circuit. That's the kind of cloth he's made out of. Here comes Derek Bell of the number 14 962 Porsche. When he crosses that line right there, he will be going on to the last lap of the Pocono Grand Prix. Little less than 3 miles separates Englishman Derek Bell from yet another checkered flag, Brock Yates.
Well, it was a harrowing moment a few laps ago for Derek Bell when he had to make a couple of stops to repair that flat tire, but otherwise it's been a really ideal afternoon for both he and Al Holbert. Right now, all they have to do is complete this final circuit, as you said. There isn't anybody that can really challenge him. Bob Tullius well back in second place, and Derek being very cautious. Right in here was where he spun the automobile and, in fact, lost a little bit of his body work. You can see the headlight cover on the left front fender is missing, and that is a little bit of a scar that took place during that excursion off the racetrack.
Well, the fiberglass bodywork on these cars, Brock, especially that nose piece, is really so flimsy you can sneeze at it real hard and blow a chunk out of it.
But I'll tell you what, Steve, a Porsche 962 fiberglass nose costs $6,000. So you want to take real good care of them, even if you got a couple of spares in the pit.
$6,000?
Yep, that's guaranteed list price. So that's a pretty expensive little piece that probably that headlight cover cost a couple of $100.
Well, he can afford to replace it with the money he's going to win as a checkered flag is displayed for Derek Bell here at the Pocono Grand Prix. A beautiful 500-kilometer drive.
A drive that he shared with teammate and car owner and team manager Al Holbert, and aside from a couple of unexpected stops for a flat tire and a little slide off into the dirt, a relatively uneventful afternoon as here comes the second place finisher, Bob Tullius, who with his teammate Doc Bundy drove well all day to take second place in their Jaguar. So as Derek Bell coasts around the 2.8-mile Pocono course on his cool-off lap, we'll be back to have a chat with him and the second place finisher. Stay with us.
Well, the Pocono Grand Prix turned out to be yet another exciting, even suspenseful IMSA racing contest, and Derek Bell crawls out of the 962 Porsche that he co-drove to victory along with team owner Al Holbert. Brock Yates is in the winner's circle.
Okay. Derek Bell as he climbs out of the winning 962. Congratulations, Derek.
Thank you.
Any specific problems all afternoon?
Well, unfortunately, we had a flat tire. And I knew it was just getting very difficult to drive on the infield. But I knew I had to stay out till I'd done enough so we didn't have to stop twice more. And I came in and I changed the rear tires because it always, when it's very stiff suspension, you think it's the other end.
Yeah.
When I went out, I realized it was the other damn end that had the flat.
I think people were surprised that you handled the Blue Thunder car as well as you did today. Didn't seem to really have as much problem as some people expected, especially in the infield.
Yes, they obviously have to put a lot of stuff underneath the car to make it work very well for qualifying, and I guess it overheats too much for the race, but we seem to have overcome that a little bit, so.
Congratulations on a super drive.
Thank you.
Let's go to Steve Evans for the second place finisher.
Well, Bob, other than a little shunt from the doctor here with the 57 car, a very smooth, nice ride today.
Well, he called in and he said that they hit him in the nose. I wondered how they backed into him. You know how that goes. We'll talk about that later. It was a good day.
And the fuel economy had a lot to do with a strong second place finish.
We finally got our management system going to the point where we think it can do what we intended for it to do. We've been working on it for quite some time, and it hasn't borne any fruit until today. We're really pleased with it.
And now, Doc, if the boss here can just find another couple of hundred horsepower, we might see in that winner's circle.
We're working on that, too.
You know, there's a commercial that says something like that. You can't beat something. Well, you can't beat the knob in this business. And all the aficionados who are watching know what the knob is.
Oh, indeed they do. Okay, maybe Brock Yates will explain that for us as he talks to the third place finisher.
Right, Steve. I'm with Don and Dale Whittington, who brought their Blue Thunder March home in third place. A hard drive all day. You just heard that Bob Tullius just said you can't beat the knob, Don. I'm sure you know it. He was talking about that boost knob and the turbo, and he's probably right, huh?
Well, you really can't. You know, a few years ago, this series was down on his tail a little bit because they had the same situations. They had the Porsches out there. We were driving them, and you couldn't beat them at all. Then John stuck to his guns, made some good rules, but then he let that thing, you know, those type cars back in, and it's just not beatable. And when you have 300 extra horsepower, you can't beat it. So they're going to have to do something with it, or the Jaguar and all these other guys. They have the best fuel they've ever had going, but people won't put up with that. It's ridiculous.
Speaking of Jaguars, you had a super race with Ryan Redman, right, Dale, in the middle of the race?
Yeah, it was good. I was trying my hardest. Had a little bit of a push. Was just trying, and we had a super race.
Well, you guys did super to run as hard as you did to get it up into third place. I'm sure you're sorry that your brother and Randy busted so late in the going. They ran as hard as they could.
They really did. They ran hard, and they just did all they could. And it's just, you know, 2 or 3 laps from the end, it just breaks your heart to break like that.
Sure does.
It's sickening.
Well, congratulations anyway for a good run and third place overall.
Brock.
Thanks.
Well, even with the knob, it takes some talented race car drivers to win a tough afternoon like we saw here today. Al Holbert and Derek Bell did just that. Average speed of their winning race, 114.9 miles an hour. Now, the quickest lap time was turned in by Sarel Vandermeer, 1:23.2 seconds. That translates to over 121 miles an hour. That was probably when the boost was stuck at 1,000 horsepower. And Brock, a tip of the hat to this man, Gene Felton, who won the GTO division in the number 65 Camel. He drove the entire 500 kilometers by himself.
a real professional and a fine race driver in all kinds of categories. This particular win coming in the GTO category for Gene Felton, but he's won in a bunch of other divisions as well. The GTO cars, stock bodies, this particular class has engine displacements over 2.8 liters. This car, of course, carrying a big American V8. Competing against them, Porsches and Datsuns and a variety of imported machinery. Gene, a real specialist in driving big displacement American stock-type automobiles, which he really excels in. A lot of people say he's one of the most underrated drivers in the country.
I agree. He has over 40 IMSA career victories. That's the most of any active driver. So again, congratulations to Gene Felton. A tough drive, a tired man, but he won it all in the GTO class.
Well, he did it all by himself, as you say, and manhandling a relatively heavy and big automobile like a Camaro around this twisty stuff, as you see him going through that infield hairpin right there and getting a little bit wide. A very, very tiring drive for Gene. So he comes in 10th overall, which puts him right up there with the fast cars. In fact, I'm sure he finished ahead of a bunch of the faster GT prototype automobiles. In the GTU category, the John Schneider, Elliott Forbes Robinson Porsche comes in 12th overall. That automobile, very similar in rules to the GTO automobiles, except that obviously those cars are under 2.8 liters displacement, so a smaller category of production-type cars.
Gene Felton's fastest lap in the GTO class was 1:31.760 seconds, a track record. Elliott Forbes Robinson, in their 924 Turbo, they won the GTU and set the fastest lap at 1:36 and change. But it was this man, Derek Bell, who really got the spotlight in the GTP category, co-driving with Al Holbert to yet another IMSA victory. And even with problems, Randy Lanier still salvaged a 5th place finish. I'm Steve.